been a while since we've done a JBI bike breakdown on an all-new bike. I think the last one that we did was the Triumph TF450 RC edition, all the way back in maybe September, October, if my memory serves me correct. But this morning we woke up to the press release of the new and refined 2026 Yamaha YZ450F.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to check it out. Yamaha's done a great job just really fine-tuning and polishing the great bike that they've had for the past 5 years now, probably even longer than that. I want to say since 2018 and 2017 the bike's been very, very, very competitive, and they just keep fine-tuning and polishing what they already have as a great bike. And based on the new updates we're seeing here, it doesn't look like they really threw out a total new redesign. They just again continued their process of further refining an already great bike into an even better one. And I'm excited to get into the nitty-gritty details of what we think they may have done.
Dude, same here. And I was kind of surprised that they updated this bike again since they did updates in 2025. They also had the new linkage ratio, some new shock springs to go along with that as well. We saw that for the 450, the 250, and some other bikes in the YZ model lineup. Model year 2026, the YZ450F is the one that's got I want to say major overhaul, but all of the revisions. Everything else seems to have some bold new graphics and the same updates that we saw in model year 25 rolled over into model year 26, that being the YZ450FX, YZ250F, all the two-stroke lines, and so on and so forth. But for this new 26 model YZ450F, we have a new chassis, a new engine, and some new suspension updates that we're going to go over in this video.
Since we do a lot of suspension, let's kind of start with suspension and chassis first, and then we're going to work on our way more to the engine and other items on there as well. But as Anthony pointed out, for 2025, they did have quite a bit new updates compared to the previous versions on that. Some of the notable updates was the new linkage ratio. So they went from the previously used 58 Newton shock spring to a 56 Newton shock spring for the same weight range of riders. It looks like they're continuing with that for 2026 as well. In my opinion, it seemed like to be a worthy change on Yamaha's end with that revised linkage ratio in terms of the shock springs that they were using. So I was pumped to see them do that. On the forks, they went with some new delta shims on the mid valve, which personally I'm not a big fan of. I like the idea of less turbulent flow going through the mid valve, but I also like the idea more of knowing that round shims, if they were to rotate, they still cover the holes and you don't lose performance drastically. I share this with you because WP has been doing delta shims on their WP cone valves for a long time now, and pretty often when we see some older pair of cone forks come in, oftentimes the mid valve and or the shims on it have spun, and this heavily reduces the performance of the mid valve. So I appreciate the performance side of things, but I much more appreciate the durability of it. So for 2026, I'm hoping they got rid of the shims, because anytime we do revalves here at the shop, we get rid of them and we default back to round ones. And for those of you that want a little more insight, it does not affect our settings at all. We've tested both delta shims and round shims, and we felt no difference out on the track riding. I understand on a dyno we can get this to show off differently, but when it comes to graphing things, depending on how you graph and model stuff, you can either make changes look very small or very little, depending on the scale that you're going to use on. But what ultimately matters is how does it feel out on the track or the trail. For that, also, they went to a longer pressure spring in 2025, which likely crossed over 2026 as well. In front of me, I have a 2025 Yamaha compression assembly. What I'm going to show you is that the free piston right here cannot move at all, whereas the free piston to the left of me is one from a KX250, which had a had KYB suspension from 2020 to 2024. And the free piston here has a small amount of play up and down. Now, mind you, when this is installed into the cartridge, it does not have play like this. Instead, oil puts positive pressure on this so it does not move. What this means is Yamaha preloaded this spring, so it takes a lot more force to move it, but they also reduced the spring rate of the pressure spring. So two things happen here. On the 2025 model, it took a little more effort to get the front wheel to break away when you first hit a bump. So it kind of became a little more rigid, or let's say less comfortable. But with the reduced pressure spring rate, it allowed the fork to bottom out easier. So in my opinion, the 2025 stock valving settings on the fork were some of the least performing settings compared to the 24, 23, 22, all the way back to about 2017. Based on what we're reading here, it sounds like they do have some minor updates on the forks, but some more heavy updates on the shock. And I really like the idea of the finger adjuster. on the shock. It was cool to see them transition from the forks having a finger clicker on it, which they kept, and also do that on the shock low speed. It would have been nice to see have a adjuster for the high speed as well, because that still requires a tool. Based on what we're reading, it says that they improved the low speed to high speed damping transition. If I had to guess, they're probably putting a crossover shim back into the compression stack on the main piston side. Yamaha used to do crossover shims inside of their valving all the way from I think 2010 to 2000 and I think 17. And then around 2019 or 20 is when they actually got rid of it and went to a straight single stage stack, is what you would call it. For a lot of manufacturers, bounce back and forth. Depending on what you're after, will heavily influence what type of stack you go after. But to overly simplify here, dual stage stacks with a crossover tend to be more favorited for motocross and off-road riding. For more stiffer applications such as supercross or freestyle, single stage stacks tend to be more favorited. But the fun part about suspension is you can build it many different ways. So we've been testing a lot with the Yamahas for a long time. We just recently put out a video with one of our pro testers of him testing at the track with some of our stuff. So it's definitely a bike where that's not a stranger to us. I personally hadn't owned and ridden Yamaha since 2006. So it's a bike I really enjoyed watching Yamaha make updates and improve over the years for it. So I've been talking for a minute. I'll let you take over and share some of your feedback on it.
Yeah, dude, I'm glad you brought up some of the suspension changes that they did in the past and what we're seeing now. Granted, we don't have a 2026 YZ450F set suspension here at the shop, so we can see exactly what they did. Looking at the bike has a new bold graphic scheme on it. It's very Yamaha-esque, a lot of gradients, a lot of fades as well, some blues, some whites, some blacks. I think it looks very clean, sleek, and the overall plastic design is very much the same, but the side plates seem to be slightly different with some added black on there as well. I think they might be even textured, so maybe it enhances the grip and overall control of the bike as the rider's on the track riding. Another new thing is the seat cover has what they're calling a honeycomb design, very reminiscent of the KTM seat cover, much like a certain Yamaha rider going to KTM branded, which leads into my next talking point is the clutch. It now comes standard with the hydraulic clutch. And I think Yamaha is going to make a lot less cable clutches since the number 3 is no longer on the blue bike.
For a while, it seemed like KTM and the Euro brands had their own styling of bikes, especially with the rear number plates being a lot, let's say, not as wide, or let's say maybe as long for like how tall of a number you can put on there. And then over time, some of the Japanese bikes have started to adopt some similar styling for it. So it's really cool to see what Yamaha has done, because by no means is it a full-on Euro styling, but I think they have a very good blend of, let's say, traditional Japanese bike styling with some of the Euro styling built into it as well. And they've, like you point out, it's a very clean looking bike, which I've come to really appreciate. Maybe that's because I'm a bit older now. I don't tend to like very loud looking bikes in terms of a lot of bright colors. To me, this looks very well thought out and again, very well refined. And if Yamaha stays on this trajectory, I think they're going to continue just winning shootouts just year over year over year, because instead of starting all over with a brand new bike and have to figure out the gremlins, they're just continuing on with what they know works well and progressing off of that. So for 2026, I foresee this definitely being a very competitive bike when it comes to shootout time for it. I think the main competitor is going to be the Triumph, if Triumph could fix their suspension, because their stock suspension is good, but not very comfortable on small bumps. Great bottoming resistance, though. From our experience of riding the Yamahas, just for the past 3 years, meaning the 25, the 24, the 23s, which you can go back and see us testing with notable people on those bikes, is we've always taken away they're fast, which for me, a little too quick. I would tune the bike down with the Yamaha tuner just for my own preferences. For reference, I'm 160, 5'10", so a 450 doesn't really know I'm on the thing. But they glide over the bumps, like especially in stock form. One day we did a shootout of our Ride JBI KTM with our best suspension on it versus our JBI spec Yamaha, and we kind of knew going into it who was going to win, but it's just fun to compare. And just the amount of small chop and track chatter that the Yamaha just glides over, you don't even feel compared to the other bikes, is very mind-blowing. Like you really need to applaud what Yamaha has done. Again, I think they lost that a little bit for 25 on the forks. So it'll be interesting to see what they did for 26. If they were me, I hope they went back to the regular free piston design, or sorry, pressure spring design. from 24 to 17. But if not, we started making our own. Our gold one's going to be our moto spec. Our chrome plated silver one's going to be our off-road spec. And we also plated them too, so you don't have to worry about those getting rusted. But we'll do a press release on those later on. But if you get a Yamaha, please bring it by the shop. First one to bring us to 26, we'll give you a free JBI spec revalve on the forks and shock. And we did something similar for the Triumph, but no pro purchase time. If you want that upgrade, you can buy it, but we will give you free valving. Mostly I just want to see what's inside there. I'm very curious to see how quickly Yamaha is reacting and updating their bike based off the 25, because there have been times I've read press releases expecting a lot, and then I open up a bike and I don't see many changes. And then conversely, there's been times I've seen brands say, oh, no new changes, and the suspension settings are different.
Yep.
Minorly. So I think what I've seen is companies will market changes when it benefits them, and they will not market changes that they made when it doesn't benefit them, because they don't want to say, hey, we might have messed up and we made some changes, but we want to just tell you it's the same.
Yeah, dude, very well said. Just to ruffle through some of the other changes real quick before we recap the video and end this off and send you guys on your way. I guess they updated the power delivery, which I'm glad you brought up earlier. The YZs are really fast. I'm 5'7", about 12 pounds soaking wet, so the bike has no idea that I'm on it. And when we rode one out at Fox Raceway, it was peeling my eyelids back. I'm like, this thing is just so fast. The power hits so hard. And
you're not Eli Tomac, man?
I am definitely not Eli Tomac. I want the smoothest map possible with that. And speaking of the maps, you can actually adjust that via the Yamaha PowerTuner app via the slide bar, which is very user friendly, which is what I like.
I love that idea.
The Kawasaki, the KX, you have this whole chart thing. I feel like I need an engineering degree just to use this freaking thing. With the Yamaha, they make it simple, easy, quick. I really appreciate that. The chassis, something we haven't touched on yet. I guess they have a slimmer down tube or a thinner down tube design. So I'm curious to see what the reasoning is for that. They're trying to get more front end stability and traction out of the bike. That's something that a lot of people that rode the 22 and older generation bike did not gel with the 23 and newer bike. So I'm guessing they're trying to get more of that 22 style feel back into this 23 to plus generation chassis, and now the 26 generation chassis as well.
Yeah, it looks like very fine refinements on the frame, because visually it looks very similar at a quick glance, at least for like the bigger features of the frame. So as you pointed out, definitely some maybe thinner walling inside of there from what they're marketing to us and showing us. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out on the track. What's challenging sometimes when it comes to, I think, testing new bikes is not only did Yamaha do a frame update, but they're doing suspension updates. And when test riders are going to ride this bike, likely we're going to hear an improvement, but without them knowing exactly what was done to the suspension, it's going to be very hard for them to tell you correctly if they know if the improvements came from the frame update or from the suspension. It would be really cool to take some 2025 stock suspension, put it on the 26, and then see how that works. So that way we can single out everything else and say, how much better did just the frame mods make it versus frame and suspension?
100%. And as a suspension shop, we often see customers call us and try to fix a suspension change or a suspension issue with a chassis adjustment. And that's not the optimal way to go about it. Yes, can you influence chassis versus suspension? Yes, you can. We have a whole series on that on our Ride JBI YouTube channel, which you can go find in our playlist section. But again, it's not the optimal way to go about it. A suspension change is your forks, your shock, compression clickers, stuff like that. A chassis change is fork tube height, sag, how far in or out your chain adjuster bolts are, stuff like that. So keep that in mind when you are wanting to mod your bike or throw aftermarket parts on your bike.
Yeah, just to heavily simplify it, suspension absorbs the jumps and the bumps, the irregularities in the ground. The frame, the chassis has the biggest influence over the handling. Again, there is a little bit of crossover on both, and that's why we did that series, chassis versus suspension, which we need to come out with some new videos on that.
Yeah, it's about time.
A little overdue.
Yeah,
because the feedback was great on them. But and then just real quick, the 7th anniversary. I love white bikes when they're new, but if I ride it one time and forget to wash it afterwards, man, I'm bummed with the stains.
Personally, I applaud them for doing another anniversary edition. We've seen them do the 50th anniversary edition back in 2023. I was super huge on that bike. The white and the purple looked absolutely awesome. Last year, they brought back the Monster Energy Yamaha Team Racing Edition, whatever it is. It's a whole mouthful. That also looks really sick. But this new 70th anniversary edition, I'm not huge on the white and red. I like the 50th anniversary edition more, if I'm going to be honest with you. It still looks pretty cool. Again, the Yamahas, I do think they're one of the better looking bikes of all the 450s. I do want to touch on price point though. The 26 Yamaha has jumped up in price. Previously, it was $9,999, one of the only few bikes below that $10,000 MSRP price point. It has now jumped up $300 to $10,299 for the standard Team Yamaha Blue Edition. For that
Oof.
70th anniversary edition, you're looking at $10,499, an extra $200 on top of the standard Yamaha Blue. So something to keep note of. And what also is, I guess, noteworthy as well is the Honda and the Suzuki are the only two 450cc bikes under that $10,000 price point.
Oh wow, dang, that's bikes keep going up in price. I think red and black would have been pretty sweet for their limited anniversary. Was it 50th anniversary when they did the yellow?
It was the white and purple slash kind of pinkish. They had the purple seat, the white shrouds with pink. They did it at Washougal. That's when they unveiled it.
Okay.
Everyone had like the whole retro theme with the purple wheels and everything. It looked super cool.
Okay, yeah, I remember for one of their anniversaries they did some yellow bikes, which were pretty rad looking. Forgot when that was though.
Yeah, maybe 2016. I could be way off.
Yeah, no,
For
yeah,
reference,
I'm
I
not
wasn't even
sure.
riding dirt bikes back then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but if you do remember, they looked pretty cool. It was very, very retro.
Thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the JBI Bike Breakdown. The 2026 Yamaha YZ450F is here, and I think it'll be in dealerships in maybe late July, early August. So you just have to wait maybe just over a month to 2 months for these bikes to be at your local dealer. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Ooh, that's about the same time as your Ducati might be showing up, huh?
Yeah, we'll be doing some shootouts, some head-to-heads. Yeah, I think I know who's going to come out on top. Not biasly at all.